Thought I'd do a quick little garden update video here. I haven't done much with the garden this winter, but we just got a whole bunch of rain here in Southern California, and so everything's very green. It's late January and it's warm enough that you know, the grass and the weeds, wild plants start growing. There's all this nettle and mallow and grass and oxalis and so forth, mustard there. But the reason I'm out here today is it's time to plant fava beans. I should have brought some of those dried beans down, but they're big beans. Actually, here's some that I planted in this cloth pot earlier. This was an experiment with some horse manure I got from a local horse riding training school that she gave me for free, and I wanted to just see how things would grow in it. So I layered it with layers of soil because I was concerned about the ivermectin that was in it, because I did text her later when I found out that sometimes they do use that deworming medicine, and I asked her what kind, and she said ivermectin. So that's a concern as far as worms. So I let this manure sit out. I had a big tarp out here. I let it sit in the sun, which supposedly kills or deactivates the, you know, the ultraviolet deactivates the ivermectin. And plus there was some straw mixed in it, which I found out the farmers use persistent herbicides to kill everything that's broadleaf, everything except grass. So I was also concerned that things wouldn't grow. And the test you do for that is to grow beans or peas and see if they grow okay. If they get all, the leaves get kind of all bent and distorted, it means there's still the persistent herbicides in there. But so I had that stuff sitting around out in the sun and in, you know, a little bit of rain for quite a while. I don't remember, a couple of months. And then I tested it and everything grew fine. But what happened was I had the beans were growing great. They grew up and up onto my the strings and the poles I had here. And but then I came out one day and they were all wilted, and I realized that the gophers had gotten in, had dug up through the bottom of the cloth pot. I could see the little mounds out here, and ate the roots. That's what they do here. I planted a little fig tree over here, and boom, suddenly one day the whole thing is wilted, and you can see the little holes where the gophers had dug. They come up underneath and eat the... So apparently the bean roots were tasty to them, but these fava plants are tough plants. They always do really well, and also they're good for you know, for the soil, like because they're nitrogen fixing like other legumes, and so they're used for that. They're sometimes just planted as cover crops in a fallow field, but I like them too because they're so useful. Not only do you get the beans, which are edible at different stages in different ways, but you can eat the young leaves, and they got these nice flowers, and they're super easy to grow, and they're a cool weather crop. So here in Southern California, you plant them late fall or in the winter, and that's the best time to grow them. In fact, if you try to grow them, you know, like late spring or summer, they won't do well. They wilt. They just don't like it. Oh, and there's some peas I threw in there too. Yum. This one's edible. These are like edible potted snow peas. But yeah, the beans are completely gone. They were probably they were that really common runner bean. I'm not thinking of it right now, but they were beans that I harvested myself. You know, the seeds that were left over from previous season. So I'm gonna try this pea now. Oh man, super sweet. I don't want to make you jealous or anything, all you folks living in the cold climates up north. But you'll get there soon enough, few months. But yeah, that was just a test thing, a big cloth bag I had that I was going to grow other stuff in, but it occurred to me I can use it as a test thing. Anyway, so today I'm slowly kind of building up the soil, throwing kitchen scraps in there. And so I've been getting all these sprouts of like, this is kabocha squash. But I get so many of those because I eat the squash and I put the, the inside of the squash in the kitchen scraps, and then throw it in these pots, which I use as little compost bins. And so then I get all these squash plants. So these are sort of like combination compost bins and whatever volunteers in there. Like, here's some potatoes growing from compost. This was an onion pot. I don't know how that's from, yeah, this one became like a little temporary compost bin, and so I threw a top of an onion in there and it grew, and I think I got a tiny squash off of this vine. And these guys are all the San Pedro cactus. A neighbor had a whole like little field out in the back of her house, and not a field, but area along the trail by her house. And I asked her if because they were chopping some landscaping down and chopping a bunch of the San Pedro, and it was a shame. All that stuff is laying on the ground going to waste. And I asked her if I could take some. She said, "Oh, please take it." And so I planted it in these pots, and San Pedro is interesting. It grows super fast. It's like the freaking fastest growing cactus I've ever seen. And it doesn't have very big spines. And I've seen it for sale, like $50, $60 for San Pedro's smaller than this on Craigslist. People use it for medicinal purposes. This one in the cloth pot, I had so many stems, I just stuck them in here. And but it's a beautiful plant too. So I enjoy growing it. And but yeah, it's going to be a job. I'm going to have to like transplant, take these all out of there, put on the gloves, and take, like a t-shirt or something and wrap these, or help me extract them. At least they don't have the big spines. But and the other interesting thing with those cactus is, it turns out this cactus mix, the cacti and succulent don't seem to grow that well in it. Like the San Pedro, it loves this Roots Organic potting soil from Aurora. They sell it over at the hydroponic store. I guess the cannabis farmers like it. And man, the cactus just loves it. Got really dark green, grew really fast. But when I used the cactus mix for the cactus, it wasn't that what. Like, see how those are kind of yellowish? And I mean, there's probably other things that also didn't get enough water. Oddly enough, the San Pedro also seem to take a fair amount of water compared to other cactus. So, I had to learn that. I didn't understand why some of it wasn't doing that well, but it's it's an unusual cactus. So anyway, I took some of these old bags of potting soil I had laying around and added it to this to get it a bit more full. And this, by the way, I built this raised bed from this big old pieces of wood that were here when I moved into the house, and I just pieced them together with these are pieces off of pallets. I took apart a bunch of pallets and used the wood to line the top. I guess the pallets are gone, but Yeah, it was quite a project. And then using corner braces to hold it together. The thing was so heavy once it was assembled, and I needed to get it level. I actually used a car jack to lift up the end. And but yeah, I had to level the ground, and because it's a slope here, and you know, move this thing or get it in position. And put a wire mesh at the bottom to so the gophers don't come up and eat everything. Same with this. This was just a this raised bed was over there when I moved in here, and I emptied it out and moved it over here, and it was just slapped together with these you know, inexpensive pieces of wood from the previous owner. And but it's interesting what happened. All kinds of stuff. I mean, at first I had tomato plants in here, and they grew huge. They were like I don't know, 7 or 8 feet tall. I had like pretty deep soil in here, good rich soil. And then after that, I got a whole bunch of volunteers, like the blackberry bushes, which grew pretty big. They died back, so I cut them back, but I don't know where they came from. Probably just birds dropping seeds. And then I got all these mint and spearmint. Spearmint just took over this thing, and it smelled fantastic. And again, I don't know where that came from. I've had all kinds of things growing in here. The little fig tree, I think, was in here. A whole bunch of things. And then these are left over from previous years. The kale, Lucinata, I think it's called, Lacinato, something like that, dinosaur kale. But it basically grows as a perennial. It becomes a little tree. Chopped it back, it regrew, and the cabbage moths, caterpillars love it. But if you catch the young leaves, it's, you know, it's fine. But if you really want it to not have caterpillars, you have to come out here and pick them off. I mean, I don't use sprays or anything like that. The rosemary is interesting because you know, it was a tiny plant in this little pot, and I just set it on top of this other pot that wasn't being used. And the roots grew down into the other pot, of course, once they reached the bottom of the first pot. And now they're like down into the soil, and there's no way I could remove this. It would be like a major project. But it's flowering now. These are a really tough, drought-tolerant plant. Once it's established, I mean, I don't have to water this, even though I've got a drip watering system on here. But it just, you know, it accelerates. It gets bigger, it grows faster and faster. So I've got more rosemary than I could possibly need. Another nice herb for cooking is this thyme. It's looking all rough right now. But it has a fantastic flavor for cooking, and I've used it, in fact, with the dried fava beans. I got a ton of dried fava beans from my plot there. So the plan is to just, I filled this up with some leftover soil, and then we're going to get a bunch of rain, which is why I'm out here today. A bunch of rain coming this weekend. So then I'll just let the rain water this, let it settle in, and then when the storm passes, I'll come out and make some holes, put some legume inoculant in them, and throw in the fava beans. Legume inoculant has the good bacteria that the legume nodules use to grab nitrogen out of the air and fixate it in a form that's useful for the plant. And you know, if you dig under the plants, then the legume plant itself enriches the soil. So that's why fava beans and clover and similar things are used for cover crops when a field is not being used for something else. So that's the wonder of legumes for you. And yeah, the fava, I mean, these are pretty small for fava beans because they were competing with all kinds of other stuff. You know, it's just a test plot. But they can get, you know, twice, 3 times as big. And I'll show you the dried beans in a minute. And now I had some other like pots for onions. They didn't do too well up there because it's so exposed. They really, and I think the soil, I had I tested some Afghanistan cannabis seeds in these pots, and I think they like just sucked all the nutrients out of the soil. I did throw some organic fertilizer in there, but that and the lack of really significant watering, I think mostly the lack of nutrients, the onions, I used onion sets, and they just never got that big. I mean, they grew, but yeah, I think it was just a lack of nutrients mostly, and this sort of harsh environment of the sun exposure there. So live and learn. That's how gardening is. It's a constant experiment. There's so many millions of factors, you never know always ahead of time what's going to happen. Life of the farmer. These are 2 different kinds of ultra hot pepper. This is the world's hottest pepper. It's winter now, and I never put it in a bigger pot, but I did get a bunch of peppers off it. It's just kind of surviving and overwintering. But this is called Carolina Reaper, which is the world's hottest pepper. I think the company that grew this guy down in South Carolina or North Carolina, he's got a company called Pucker Butt, I think it's called. And that guy developed this pepper. It's in the Guinness Book of World Records, and here's a tiny one, bigger one. But that plant was doing pretty well until it kind of reached the limit of the pot size and maybe nutrients. Those peppers are, yeah, they're ultra hot. They don't have a lot of flavor, but if you want just straight heat, that has it. This is a similar pepper. It's also just kind of overwintering. We'll see what happens if it regrows in the spring. But this one is Trinidad Scorpion. I bought it as a small plant. It was actually out in front of the health food grocery store. Grown by Certified Plant Growers Incorporated. So this is also a super hot pepper, and it was fun to grow. See him, had a very interesting shape. But again, I think the pot ultimately wasn't quite big enough, and I didn't re-fertilize it after initially planting, so it never got really big. But you know, I didn't really care because I wasn't looking for some giant harvest. It was more just like a fun experiment, a spontaneous thing. I saw these plants at the store and thought I'd try them. But that's pretty much it for now. Just a quick little tour, and I'll go show you the fava beans. So these are some of the fava beans from previous years from that plot. I didn't really label them, or this is from last year, I believe, this big bag. This is from 2023 also. Anyway, they're pretty productive. It's really amazing what you can get from a small plot. And they make these big beans, and you know, they're edible as green beans if you pop the inner bean out. If they're really young, you can eat the whole thing, but generally I make like pasta with the green fava beans. And but with these guys, the dried ones, you can also make a really delicious soup. I made a soup with these. I soaked them and then cooked them in an Instant Pot, and I threw in some onions and garlic and thyme and rosemary, salt and pepper, and it was great. My neighbors loved it too. But yeah, you don't have to plant many of these, like just a dozen seeds, and you'll get these big plants. As I said, in here you can grow them in the winter. So I've grown these many years, and I save seeds and just plant them from previous years. So who knows what these genetics are, and they probably kind of adapted to the local climate. But I've got so many, I don't know what to do with them all, so I just throw them in bags and keep them. And you know, if the apocalypse comes, I'll be prepared for. You can also make hummus. I was at a farmer's market once, and this Middle Eastern guy had hummus that he made from fava beans rather than garbanzo beans. So that's pretty cool. Very ancient, very useful plant with beautiful leaves and flowers. So that's what I'm going to plant is in that raised bed. As soon as the storm passes, I have to check if I still have any legume inoculant powder. I mean, it's not absolutely necessary, in that potting soil already has the beneficial bacteria, but I don't know if it specifically has the bacteria that the legumes use. And I think the plants do get bigger if you use that inoculant. All right, that's it. Hope you enjoyed that.